Life often takes unexpected turns that change everything in ways you never see coming. To those who have stuck around, I'm grateful. There's just never enough time for the love you try to give, and as the seasons shift, so do we. Don't wonder where all that time went. It's simply gone. Let me paint a picture for you. An ordinary family. I'm Eric Jenson, a 45-year-old man, hairline steadily retreating, in reasonably good shape, though I could stand to shed 10 pounds or so. I've traded glasses for contacts, though I still don't need readers yet. My wife, Lara, is also 45. She carries a little extra weight around her midsection, with a fuller figure that I used to appreciate. She's not stunning, nor is she unattractive. Just a plain woman who insists everyone use her full name. Lara is the kind of woman who has her preferences and makes sure everyone knows it. Then there's our daughter, Ellie, 21 now, a sharp college senior who has put on some weight since her volleyball days in high school. She's got this fierce independence about her, always ready to argue for women's rights, though she's still reliant on us. I'm the only one bringing in money, and it's been tight. I didn't want Ellie saddled with student loans, so she's still living at home. But that doesn't mean Lara and Ellie don't enjoy the good life. I drive around in an old F-150, while they both get to enjoy their fancy luxury cars. The house doesn't have much equity left, since their lifestyle has been funded through home equity loans. We live in a typical suburban neighborhood, where there's the occasional block party. We're not really close to most of the neighbors, except for the folks next door. Their daughter, Megan, is Ellie's best friend. When Ellie left for college, I felt kind of empty. We used to spend so much time together, and then suddenly there was this void. Even volunteering couldn't fill it. One night, I couldn't take it anymore, so I asked Lara if she was happy. I asked, "Lara, are you happy?" She responded with a sharp, "Happy with what?" I went on, "With your life. You've drifted away from me, and you've lost that spark. I miss how we used to spend time with Ellie. I don't know. I just feel like I'm bored. Are we okay? Is there something I'm missing? Something I'm not doing right for you?" Lara dismissed my concerns, saying, "We're fine. I don't have any complaints. Why are you asking all these questions?" I just wanted her to be happy, so I suggested, maybe you should see a counselor or talk to someone who can help you get your balance back, improve your mood. She seemed indifferent, saying she wasn't sure, but would think about it. I let it go for the moment, feeling that familiar cold distance between us. 2 weeks passed, and then she casually mentioned she had started weekly sessions with a life coach. You might think I hoped this would rekindle something between us, especially in the bedroom, but nothing changed. We still stuck to our same routine, twice a week like clockwork. Is that normal? I have no idea. I've never discussed my bedroom life with anyone, nor do I pry into my friends' private matters. We've got neighbors to the south, David and Karen, both in their 60s. David's not the best when it comes to fixing things, while Karen's an avid baker. Her treats have definitely added a few pounds to my waistline. One afternoon, I was over at David's, working on his sauna pump, when I overheard a conversation. They were talking about their sliding patio door, saying, "That scratching noise is back again." Unless Lara had come back from visiting her mother, it had to be Ellie making that noise. I hadn't seen her around for a while, so I sat down in the backyard gazebo to relax. That's when I overheard Ellie's conversation. I heard her say, "He's inside somewhere. His car is still here." I couldn't believe what came next. She said, "Mom, you're so old-fashioned. Give Tom a shot. Megan says he's a wild one, and you should make sure you're satisfied. Maybe that's what you need to spice things up in the bedroom." I was floored. My wife had been complaining to our daughter about our intimate life. That's something I never thought I'd hear. Ellie continued, "You've got to think about it. Oh, and by the way, Dad's going hunting next weekend. I'll have Ryan invite Tom over. He may be a bit scrawny, but he's totally into you." Megan even said his size is perfect for some fun. I was in shock, thinking, is my daughter really trying to set Lara up with Ryan's friend? Ellie went on, "You don't have to do anything, but since you've never tried something like this, maybe it's worth experimenting." I was seething by this point. My blood was boiling. Here they were, Lara and Ellie, plotting behind my back to destroy my marriage. What did I ever do to deserve this kind of betrayal? "All right, love you, Mom. Bye," Ellie said, and the call ended. My hands were shaking with rage. It's a miracle I didn't end up hurting myself while fiddling with that stupid sauna pump. For the next week, things at home were unbearable. I went out of my way to irritate both Lara and Ellie, and it worked. I retreated to my office or the garage most of the time, sharpening my tools and doing whatever I could to keep busy. I didn't cancel my hunting trip, though, but I did make sure someone was keeping an eye on Lara while I was gone. Sure enough, the photos I got back on Saturday showed Ellie, Ryan, and some skinny guy walking into the house around noon. Ellie and Ryan left a couple of hours later, and the guy didn't leave until 4. When I got back late Sunday, Lara tried to be all sweet and affectionate, but I wasn't having any of it. Nothing had been proven outright, but something felt off. Lara was sitting strangely, her legs crossed in an odd way, leaning more to one side than usual, like she was uncomfortable. Later that night in the kitchen, Ellie sealed their fate. She gave Lara a playful smack on the behind, and they both laughed like schoolgirls covering it with fake coughs. I felt this heavy weight settle on my chest. I even started to worry. Was it the people I went hunting with? Had they exposed me to something? That night, I chose to sleep on the couch, far away from Lara. I needed space, and I couldn't stand to be near her. The next morning, I came up with an excuse. I told them I was feeling sick, that I had trouble breathing, and that I needed to see a doctor. My boss had no issue with me taking the day off. My real plan, though, was to fake having COVID. It would give me the time I needed to set things in motion, to figure out my exit strategy. With the sick leave and vacation time I had built up, I could stay away long enough to make it through to Christmas Eve, our family's annual dinner. That's when I'd make my move. Announcing that I had COVID was an easy way to keep everyone at a distance. Did I actually have it? I didn't know for sure. I was fully vaccinated and felt fine physically, but emotionally, my heart was shattered. I needed to distance myself from 4 people, not because my lungs were failing, but because I was ready to walk away from them all. I checked into an extended stay hotel. There was no reason for me to live like a pauper while I figured things out. When I told Lara I'd be out of quarantine in time for Christmas Eve, she almost seemed relieved. She and Ellie called me twice a day, but I kept things brief. I was polite, feigning exhaustion to avoid giving away my real plans. My time was spent plotting my next steps, preparing for what would come. I updated my will, changed beneficiaries, and sorted out emergency contacts. Apartment hunting was tough. It hit me hard just how final my decision to divorce Lara was, and how I'd be forcing Ellie to finally stand on her own. When anger consumes you, all kinds of dark thoughts run through your mind. Most of mine, if acted on, would land me in jail, which didn't fit with my future plans. The idea to hire an escort to trap Ryan came from a news story I had seen, where a company used the same tactic to get rid of unwanted employees. It was a sneaky, two-edged sword, but one that would not only bring down Ryan, but hurt Ellie too, which I felt she fully deserved at this point. As for Christmas Eve, our artificial tree blinked with red, white, and green lights, and the smell of pine cones filled the air. It was our long-held tradition, gathering around the dining room table for 23 years, though the first 2 years were without Ellie. Lara had prepared the meal, and it sat in front of us. Normally, we'd say a short prayer of gratitude before eating, but this year, I had other plans. I stood up to speak, but it wasn't going to be any kind of happy toast. I started by asking Ryan, "So, how's Nicole?" His face drained of all color as soon as I said the name. Ellie, seated next to him, turned to Ryan with a puzzled look. They had been together since high school, and it always seemed like they were going to last. But that was about to change. Ryan stammered, insisting he didn't know any Nicole. I pressed him, describing the raven-haired woman with ruby-red lips who had been with him just last Sunday night. He looked like a deer caught in the headlights, frozen and panicked. His weak denial didn't fool anyone. His words lacked conviction, and it was obvious he was lying. That's when I hit play on my phone and let the audio clip speak for itself. Ryan's voice rang out clearly. "Nicole, you're amazing. Don't stop." "Oh God, I'm about to." I stopped the recording right there. It was undeniable. That voice belonged to Ryan. Ellie exploded in rage, shouting accusations at him, demanding that he leave. But before Ryan could even stand, I stepped behind him, pushing him back down into his chair. Both of us had to stop Ellie from physically attacking him. I turned to Lara and instructed her to take Ellie into the other room, to calm her down. I explained that Ryan and I needed to have a man-to-man talk. Lara quietly guided Ellie out of the dining room and into the kitchen, leaving Ryan and me alone to finish what needed to be said. It wasn't exactly a quiet exit, as Ellie's string of four-letter words echoed through the house. It only took a few minutes to lay out the next steps for Ryan. He was to warn Tom to stay far away from me, unless Tom wanted to seriously regret the day he was born. Ryan quickly understood where he stood and the few options he had left. He wasn't in control anymore. As I slid a manila envelope across the table, Ryan agreed to do one last thing for me. I called out to the kitchen, asking Lara to bring Ellie back. When they returned, both of them were visibly shocked and teary-eyed. Let me explain how I got that recording. I started. Ryan, her name isn't Nicole, and to be honest, I don't even know her real name. She's an escort, an expensive one, I might add. I hired her to seduce you, Ryan, and record the whole thing. There's even a video, if you're interested. Ellie was beside herself. Daddy, what the heck? You hired her, she shouted, stunned. I didn't flinch and admitted it outright. Yes, sweetie, I did. How does it feel to be betrayed? Stabbed in the back, just like I was. Lara made a tiny noise, and I could see Ellie's eyes darting back and forth between her and me, trying to piece it all together. Both women were in tears. I turned to Ryan. Do you have anything to say? I asked, and then flipped my phone to video mode. Ryan stood up, grabbed the folder in front of him, and addressed Lara. Lara Jenson, you've been served, he said as he handed the papers to her. I wasn't sure if she was going to faint or vomit, but it was clear one of the two was coming as soon as she regained her composure. The scent of pine cones couldn't mask the intensity of the moment, as the reality of those divorce papers landed like a punch to the gut. While Ellie and Lara sobbed together in the master bedroom, I went outside to take care of business. Ellie's Audi, which had been an early graduation gift, was loaded onto a carrier and driven away. Everything she had left in her car was tossed into a trash bag and left on the porch. Lara's BMW was next, but this time, her belongings were moved into an old 23-year-old sedan, a fitting symbol of our 23-year marriage. My lawyer had made sure I still provided her with transportation, even if it wasn't what she was used to. With the credit cards paid off and canceled, both of Ellie's cards, since I was the co-signer, were cut off as well. I poured myself another shot of bourbon, needing it more than ever. Their cell phones were canceled too, but I did give Lara a basic phone, one with limited talk time and text. Ellie didn't get the same consideration. While Lara had a basic phone, both of them had held on to their fancy iPhones, complete with all the bells and whistles. Meanwhile, I went to the garage, grabbed a for sale sign, and hammered it into the front yard with a few hard swings. I couldn't officially sell the house since Lara's name was still on the title, but I wanted her to see what the future held. Instead of staying upstairs and listening to the Christmas music playing by the tree, I retreated to the basement. Sitting alone in the dark was oddly comforting, especially when I could hear the ruckus upstairs. They must have figured out by now that none of their phones or devices were working. That's when the insults started. They were calling me some pretty unkind names, nothing compared to the things I had been shouting in my empty hotel room while planning this. Eric, we need to talk. I heard them call out, panic creeping into their voices. They were guessing that maybe I'd gone for a walk since my car was missing, but the other one was still there. They didn't know what to make of the unfamiliar car parked out front. Without their phones working, it didn't take long for them to suspect I'd canceled their service. They decided to head over to Karen's place to use her phone. That's where they messed up. As soon as they stepped outside, I locked the doors behind them. Now, they were stuck. No phones, no credit cards, and no way to get back in since their purses were still inside. I didn't feel a bit of remorse when I later shredded their driver's licenses. Petty? Maybe. But it would definitely make things harder for them as they tried to get back on their feet. I poured myself another shot of bourbon and sat down in front of the TV. Some cheesy holiday special was on, but the heartwarming story unfolding on the screen felt a million miles away from what was happening in my life. After a few minutes, I turned it off and just sat in the silence. It felt better that way. Before long, there was a commotion at the front door. Lara and Ellie had returned, and it didn't take long before Ellie noticed the trash bag sitting on the porch. "Oh my God! This is everything from my car," she shrieked. "Dad got rid of my car." Lara wasn't buying it. He wouldn't do that, she said, sounding more annoyed than anything. That's just not something he would do. Well, Mom, maybe your car's gone too. If he sold mine, I'm going to be furious. I love that car. Ellie snapped back, with the doorbell ringing incessantly. I could barely hear the rest of their conversation. Lara, now angry, shouted, Eric, open this door right now. It's freezing out here. I called back without hesitation. Mitch, the keys to your new car are in the ignition. That orange and green Malibu out front? That's yours now. All your stuff in the old car is already moved over. I heard the heater takes a little while to kick in, but don't worry, it's got a full tank of gas. Maybe you can drive it over to Tom's place. He probably still has a soft spot for you. Their voices shifted from anger to shock. I could hear one of them whisper, he knows. Lara, suddenly desperate, tried to smooth things over. Eric, please, let me explain, she begged, her voice almost pleading now. There was silence for a moment, and then she tried again, this time softer. Eric, I know you can hear me. Just say something. Merry Christmas. I didn't hesitate. You'd better leave, Mishy, and take that girl with you. A few minutes later, the old Malibu coughed to life, the engine making a sound like it needed a new muffler. I wasn't surprised. After all, the guy practically gave it to me just to get it off his hands. I sure wasn't about to spend a dime fixing it. Without much fuss, the two of them drove off. It's been years since I've heard of anyone dying from carbon monoxide poisoning due to a bad muffler, but who knows? Maybe I get lucky. Probably not. About an hour later, my father-in-law's phone number lit up on my cell phone. We've never been close, just tolerated each other out of necessity. I thought about picking it up, but ultimately let it go to voicemail. His message was short and to the point. Hey, Eric, I got a couple of upset women over here. Thought you could shed some light on what's going on. Give me a call. Oh, and Merry Christmas. I muted my phone, took another sip of my spiked eggnog, and slowly felt the adrenaline start to fade. The blinking lights of the fake Christmas tree eventually lulled me to sleep. When I woke up, the sun was shining on a cold Christmas morning. The dishes were still on the dining room table from last night, but the microwave did a good job reheating my ham and cheesy potatoes. Honestly, ham and cheesy potatoes work any time of year. There were still presents under the tree, but I didn't bother opening any of them. Santa hadn't left me anything because those gifts weren't really for me. They were for after-dinner celebrations I had no interest in. Had anyone noticed? I hadn't given a single gift to anyone, and I wasn't about to open theirs. Instead, I packed up the things that mattered most to me. Family photos? Those stayed scattered on the floor where I found them. I wasn't taking those with me. It took Lara a few days to track me down at the hotel. By the time she did, the sun was setting, and a cold breeze whipped around outside. I left the latch on the door when I answered it, half expecting some kid to be selling poinsettias for a youth sports team. But no, it was Lara, her face pale, and for once, she wasn't wearing any makeup or had her hair done. Eric, please don't close the door, she pleaded. I didn't shut it, but I wasn't about to make this easy for her either. What do you want, Miss She? I asked coldly. She hesitated, then said, I just need a chance to explain. Can I come in? No. Y replía firmly. Please, Eric, she begged. Your neighbors don't need to hear all of this. What part of no don't you understand? I shot back. I'd be happy to explain it to you. Lara sighed, then spoke softly. Okay, let me start by saying how sorry I am. I can't explain why I did what I did. I raised an eyebrow. What actions are we talking about, Mishy? Be specific. She hesitated again, almost nervously. Eric, please, not out here. Let me come in and explain. Then, in a barely audible voice, she confessed, I'm talking about being with Tom. I blinked, stunned. You had something with Tom? Well, doesn't that just take the cake? Her eyes widened, realizing I hadn't fully known. You didn't know? She asked quietly. No, I said, my voice steady. But I do now. And now you get to deal with the consequences of your actions. Her face turned pale as she stammered. Wait, so you were going to divorce me without any proof? I guessed right, didn't I? I said, have you found yourself an attorney yet? She looked at me with desperation. I'm working on it, but we don't have to get divorced. I'll do anything you want to save our marriage. I shook my head. It's too late for that, Mishy. Why didn't you want to save our marriage a month ago when it still mattered? I know exactly why. It's because you're selfish and think you're above consequences. You thought you could do whatever you wanted without facing any repercussions, didn't you? So tell me, how long did it take for you to admit it? A day later? A week? How many others have there been, Lara? She recoiled, visibly shaken by the harshness in my voice. It was the only time. You have to believe me, Eric. One stupid decision shouldn't ruin our marriage. I didn't let up. Which stupid decision are we talking about? Because I see a lot of them. Planning to cheat might have earned you some forgiveness. Actually cheating? That's the line. Hiding it ensured there's no chance for us. But the worst part? You involved our daughter. Your daughter. I don't want anything to do with her anymore. And that's all on you. If you'd kept your dirty secrets to yourself, she never would have been dragged into this. I hate you. I could see some of the neighbors peeking through their windows, probably enjoying the show. But I didn't care. Eric, I said I'm sorry, Lara pleaded. How can I make this right? You can't. I snapped back. I'm better off without you. Maybe I'll be okay. Maybe I won't. But either way, it'll be on my terms. Divorce your cheating self and move on. Do you understand? Please, Eric, she begged, her voice cracking. I know you're hurt and angry, but don't do anything for a couple of weeks. It was just one afternoon. What can I do to convince you? I kept my composure, though it wasn't easy. Just leave and never bother me again. Now, if you'll excuse me, halftime's over, and I've got a bowl game to watch. Thanks for stopping by. Actually not. I closed the door, cutting off whatever she was about to say. She knocked softly, pleading for a while, but my noise-canceling headphones made sure I didn't hear much. I don't know how long she stayed, but by morning, she was gone. 11 months later, I found myself in my one-bedroom apartment, keeping the Christmas Eve tradition alive, alone, and by choice. A simple meal, one I cooked myself after finally learning how. They say betrayal feels like being stabbed in the back, but in truth, it shattered my heart, my ego, and my confidence. But my self-respect? That stayed intact. I'd often wondered if I overreacted, but not once did I ever believe I had. I realized I'd become disposable to her, so I walked away. Case closed. The months spent in the limbo of divorce left me feeling drained. I was irritable most of the time, and my boss had to reprimand me more than once for snapping at coworkers. As time went on, I withdrew from social life and became more of a recluse. My coworkers quickly learned to keep their distance, and I buried myself in my work. I skipped all the company parties, choosing solitude over for small talk. Friends tried setting me up on dates, but I turned them down one by one until they eventually stopped calling. My self-pity felt like a bottomless pit, and it seemed like I had no way out. I picked up running as a way to clear my mind, using my earbuds as a clear signal to others that I wasn't in the mood for conversation. Between running and learning to cook for myself, I started shedding weight, so much so that none of my old clothes fit anymore. Occasionally, a coworker would compliment me on how I looked, but it never went beyond that. I wasn't interested in any of it. The divorce proceedings dragged on for 9 long months. The house sold quickly, and instead of paying monthly support, Lara received a significant portion of the proceeds. Ellie and Ryan went their separate ways, with Ryan bitterly blaming me for setting him up with Nicole. Funny how it's always someone else's fault. I wasn't there with Nicole. He was weak. Just like most men his age, easily led astray by a seductive woman. As for Ellie, she left me angry voicemails, but I never responded. Maybe one day I'll call her back, but I wouldn't count on it. I didn't receive an invitation to her graduation, and I certainly didn't attend. Things were rough for Lara, too. She hadn't held a full-time job since we got married. My attorney did what he could to drag out the financial matters as long as possible. Eventually, after the house sold, I settled up and paid back what I owed. The court ruled that she should have been receiving maintenance, so now her comfortable lifestyle was over. And honestly, mine wasn't looking much better. During some of our attorney meetings, Lara tried to convince me she'd just made a huge mistake, but I stayed cold, unmoved. She cried a little, but it didn't affect me. Hate is a powerful thing, and I couldn't seem to control mine. A year later, I found myself continuing the Christmas Eve tradition, this time in my small apartment. Tessa, a friend who had gone through something similar, joined me. No, it wasn't a romantic relationship. Neither of us was ready for that. After we finished cleaning up the dishes, Tessa led me to the living room, and we danced. We held each other close, and for a moment, I remembered what it felt like to have the warmth of a woman by my side. But after about 10 songs, Tessa wiped away a tear and left. The truth is we were both damaged goods. The voicemails Ellie left me once a month had taken a different tone by then. The anger had faded, replaced with something softer. She sounded apologetic in the voicemails, but I never returned her calls. It wasn't until my mother accidentally mentioned that Lara had moved in with someone new that I realized how indifferent I felt about it. The news didn't hit me the way I thought it would. I was surprised by how little I cared. I started making small talk with people again, though former coworkers tended to avoid me, and the new ones seemed to find me a little odd. Making new friends didn't come easily, but I managed to bridge the gap with Tessa, and we stayed close. Then, in late January, I received a letter from Ellie. I debated whether I should open it, but curiosity got the best of me. The letter was short and to the point. Inside was a note and a selfie. "Daddy, I'm sorry for what I did to you. As you can see from the picture, I'm pregnant. I was wondering if you could find it in your heart to include a grandchild in your life. If not, I understand. Love, Ellie." The return address was from a few counties over, and there wasn't any mention of a husband. Looking at the picture left me conflicted. I couldn't forget how much she had hurt me, but deep down, I had always wanted grandchildren. Still, I didn't rush to respond. It would be a few weeks before I decided what to do. In the meantime, Tessa and I drifted apart. We both knew that we had been leaning on each other just to get through tough times, but it wasn't something built to last. She made the decision to move far away and start fresh. We exchanged a few long hugs before she left my life for good. To keep myself from spiraling, I took up pickleball at the rec center. It's similar to tennis, but with a different set of rules. Eventually, I found a group of people with similar skill levels, and it almost felt like being back in junior high gym class. During one game, I accidentally hit a player named Rachel with the ball, and her friends teased her, saying I should kiss it to make it better. I jokingly blew her a few kisses, and as we were leaving, she asked if I could buy her a soft drink. She said I seemed really quiet and shy. We ended up walking to a nearby Jamba Juice, where we kept talking. Rachel was a fantastic conversationalist, a total contrast to me. Rachel shook her head vigorously, wagging her finger at me like I was in trouble. A few of the ladies whistled, and as I put my shirt back on, Rachel mouthed, "You're terrible," at me. I just blew her a playful kiss in response. After the games, there was some light-hearted banter among the group, with one of the ladies joking about how great she looked out of yoga pants. Rachel patiently waited her turn to chat. We struck up a friendly conversation, and before long, Rachel asked if I'd buy her a soft drink. I smiled and said, "Funny, I was just about to ask you the same." Rachel raised an eyebrow and playfully responded, "Nice. Yoga pants, huh? Pretty proud of yourself, aren't you?" As we sipped our drinks, I mustered up the courage to ask Rachel out for dinner and a movie, fully expecting rejection. But to my relief, she agreed. After being out of the dating game for over 27 years, I felt clueless, awkward, and honestly, a bit scared at first. But over time, I started to relax, and little by little, the more upbeat version of myself began to surface again. After several dates, Rachel suggested that I spend the night. One evening, she surprised me with a personal question. "Who were you thinking of when we were intimate?" she asked, catching me off guard. I paused for a moment and then replied, "Honestly, I was appreciating you and wondering what you saw in someone like me." She smiled softly, and our connection deepened. With time, we became even more intimate, both emotionally and physically. Eventually, Rachel introduced me to her family and grandchildren. At first, it was awkward. They were protective of her, as expected. But as time passed, they began to accept me. In early June, as Rachel cuddled up to me in bed, she suggested we celebrate our closeness. Things quickly became more passionate, and just as I realized what she meant, I shared something with her. Ollie had given birth to a baby girl just 2 days ago. Our passions briefly flared, and we made love, feeling even more connected than before. The next day, I sent flowers to Ollie, acknowledging her new role as a mother. Then, a day later, I received an overnight letter from her. In the letter, Ollie expressed sincere apologies and a desire to reconnect. She mentioned how she had come to understand the lessons I had tried to teach her and explained how she had grown. She also wrote about her daughter, Grace, and the hope that we could reunite. I shared the letter with Rachel. After reading it, she looked at me and asked what I planned to do. I expressed my concerns about how reconnecting with Ollie might affect our relationship. Rachel wrapped me in a warm hug and kissed me gently, reassuring me that she understood. Rachel gently emphasized that I needed to let go of the past if I wanted our relationship to truly grow. She had a way of grounding me, helping me see that holding on to old pain only held me back from what was right in front of me. With her by my side for support, I finally built up the courage to knock on Ellie's door, catching her completely off guard. When she opened the door, her eyes widened in surprise, but she quickly softened, offering a hesitant smile. We shared a brief, affectionate hug, a small but important step in healing the rift between us. As we stepped inside, the familiar scent of home cooking filled the air. Ellie had done well for herself, I thought, as I glanced around her apartment, noting the toys scattered on the floor, signs of a busy life with a baby. Grace sat in her playpen, cooing softly, completely unaware of the complicated emotions swirling in the room. I picked up Grace for the first time, holding her close. She didn't cry, didn't squirm, just looked at me with those big, innocent eyes. It hit me then how small she was, her tiny hands, her delicate feet. It was like holding a fragile piece of the future. I felt a pang in my chest, realizing how much time I had lost, but also how much hope she represented. As we sat down to talk, Rachel, ever the gentle mediator, brought up Ellie's relationship with Grace's father. Ellie sighed and explained that he wasn't ready to commit, that he had been distant ever since Grace was born. There was a sadness in her voice that I hadn't expected, but also a strength. She was determined to make it work as a single mother, and I found myself respecting her more for that. Throughout the evening, Ellie and I kept a cautious distance, not wanting to rush the mending of old wounds. We made small talk, catching up on the little details of each other's lives, but there was an unspoken understanding between us that we weren't quite ready for a full reconciliation. Rachel, sensing the lingering tension, gently nudged me before we left. "You should say it," she whispered, giving my hand a reassuring squeeze. With a deep breath, I went back into the apartment, hugged Ellie once more, and told her, "I still love you, Ellie." She hugged me back, and for the first time in years, I felt like we were truly starting to heal. 6 months later, I hosted the traditional Christmas Eve dinner in my apartment. It wasn't the same as it had been in the past, but there was something special about this new version of our family. Rachel, Ellie, and I sat together, with little Grace nestled in my arms. I offered a Christmas blessing, my voice steady as I gave thanks for second chances, for the ability to move forward. We dined together, exchanging gifts and sharing stories. It felt like the beginning of something better, something more grounded and real than before. That night, after the dinner was cleaned up and Ellie had left with Grace, Rachel and I spent the night at her house. It wasn't just about the comfort of being with her. It marked a real change in our relationship. We were building something new together, something that didn't carry the weight of the past. A year later, Christmas Eve came around again, but this time, it was Rachel's house that hosted the celebration. The once awkward boundaries had softened, and Ellie felt more like a part of my life again. Grace had grown into a lively toddler, and watching her play reminded me of the value in moving forward, of not letting the bitterness of the past define me. As we sat around the dinner table, laughing and enjoying the moment, I realized how much had changed in a year. Life had moved forward, and in that movement, I had found contentment. It wasn't the life I had envisioned all those years ago, but it was a good life. A new chapter had opened, and for the first time in a long time, I was excited about what the future might hold.